Okay, so you've given us a really interesting set of documents about Indigenous Australians
Yeah.
and how they're using their knowledge to care for their country.
Yeah.
We've got this guidelines document
Right.
and then like a call for case studies almost. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
guide to best practices full of like real life stories and examples.
It is.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really remarkable to see how these documents,
Mm.
I think, really get to the heart of Indigenous knowledge.
Yeah,
And they go way beyond just, simple land management practices.
right.
It's really a whole philosophy of life.
Right. It's like our knowledge, our way is this whole
On Earth.
philosophy, not just like a set of instructions.
Yeah.
So for this deep dive, I think our mission is to uncover those core principles.
Okay.
How do Indigenous Australians define and protect and actually use their knowledge
Mhm.
to care for their land and sea?
I think one of the things that's fascinating here is that Indigenous knowledge
Yeah.
is so much more than just, knowing about plants and animals.
Yeah. Okay.
It encompasses language and culture and law and spirituality,
Right.
art stories, songs.
Wow.
It's all interconnected.
Like a whole web of knowledge
It is
where everything's linked.
Yeah.
And speaking of interconnectedness, the documents emphasize like the sheer diversity
Yes.
of Indigenous societies across Australia.
Absolutely.
So like the Yoyu people in Arnhem Land have different practices and traditions
Mm,
than, say, the Irinte people in Central Australia.
absolutely. Each group has a unique connection to their country
Yeah.
that's been formed over thousands of years.
Right.
And so it's so important to avoid making generalizations
Yeah.
about, Indigenous knowledge.
Right.
Because there's so many different ways of knowing and being and doing.
Yeah.
And you can really see this diversity in Figure 1.3, which is a map of Indigenous languages
Oh, cool.
across Australia.
Okay.
It's really a visual reminder of how many distinct knowledge systems exist.
Wow. Just looking at that map makes you realize the depth and richness of
Mhm.
Indigenous cultures.
Yeah.
But one thing that kind of struck me was this idea that traditional knowledge
Yeah.
isn't static.
Right.
How does
Yeah.
that work exactly?
It's a common misconception that traditional knowledge is stuck in the past.
Okay.
But the reality is that it's incredibly dynamic and adaptive.
Really?
Oh, yeah. For example, many groups have incorporated new technologies
Oh, wow.
like drones and apps
Okay.
into their land management practices.
Oh, interesting.
So that's traditional knowledge evolving in action.
So it's about responding to what the land tells you,
Exactly.
not sticking to some rigid set of rules.
Yeah.
But, thinking about Australia's history, I can't imagine colonization was good for these knowledge systems.
Sadly, you're right.
Yeah.
Colonization had a devastating impact
Okay.
on Indigenous knowledge systems.
Yeah.
Forced removal from country, the suppression of languages and ceremonies,
Right.
the imposition of Western values, all contributed to a breakdown in the transmission of knowledge
Oh, wow.
between generations.
That's heartbreaking.
It is.
But the documents also talk about healing and revitalization.
Yes.
So what are some specific examples of how Indigenous communities are working to reclaim their knowledge?
Well, there are so many inspiring initiatives happening across the country.
Oh, great.
For instance, the Arabana people are holding on-country language camps,
Okay.
which is described in case study 2.3.
Okay.
Elders teach language, they share stories,
Mm-hmm.
and connect younger generations to their cultural heritage.
So it's about immersing them in the richness
It is.
of their language and traditions.
Yeah.
It's like hitting a reset button
Yeah.
and rebuilding those connections.
Exactly.
It's not just about language, though, right?
No.
What are some other ways communities are strengthening their knowledge systems?
Well, think about the power of art.
Okay.
Figure 2.1 shows a painting called Wangina and Wanunga,
Okay.
which depicts the relationship between ancestral beings,
Mm-hmm.
bees, and the production of honey. It's a beautiful example of how art can transmit ecological knowledge
That's cool.
and cultural values.
It's amazing how like a single image can convey so much meaning.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine there are rules around how this knowledge is shared,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
Like who gets to hold it and who can share it.
You've hit on a crucial aspect
Okay.
of our knowledge our way,
Okay.
and that is knowledge governance.
Okay.
It's about ensuring that knowledge is protected and respected
Mm-hmm.
and shared responsibly according to customary law.
Okay.
And this is where the concept of knowledge protocols comes in.
So before sharing any knowledge, you need to understand the cultural context
Yes.
and protocols surrounding it.
Absolutely.
What's a good example of how these protocols work in practice?
Well, case study 1-1 explores the ancestral spirit beings,
Okay.
the Dua and Yirija in Yoyu culture,
Okay.
and it provides a really vivid illustration of how knowledge is deeply connected
Mm.
to their identity, their spirituality, and their responsibilities.
Wow.
And not everyone can access or share this knowledge.
Okay.
It's governed by strict protocols that are passed down
Yeah.
through generations.
It's a powerful reminder that we're not just dealing with information,
Right.
we're dealing with the essence of a culture.
Exactly.
What else should we understand about knowledge protocols?
Well, we have to be aware of the potential for misappropriation.
Okay.
The source material highlights concerns,
Okay.
like knowledge being taken out of context or used for profit without permission, or even misrepresented.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Respect needs to be at the forefront
absolutely.
of any interaction.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of when things haven't gone so well?
Well, Patricia Marfura McTaggart,
Okay.
who is a senior Gingi Wumeri elder,
Okay.
shares her experience in case study 3-1.
Okay.
She is a linguist and a custodian of extensive biocultural knowledge.
Wow.
But she's had instances where her knowledge wasn't treated respectfully
Oh, no.
or acknowledged properly when working with researchers.
Oh, wow.
So it's a cautionary tale about the importance of trust in knowledge sharing.
Her story really highlights the potential for harm
It does.
when these protocols are ignored.
Yeah.
So what are some ways to ensure that knowledge sharing is done ethically and respectfully?
It all comes down to building genuine relationships built on trust and reciprocity.
Okay.
Instead of viewing indigenous knowledge as something to be extracted,
Right.
we need to approach it with humility and a willingness to listen and learn.
So it's about recognizing that knowledge is not just a commodity.
Exactly.
It's intertwined with people's lives and identities and cultures. And when that knowledge is shared, it should be a mutually beneficial process
Yes.
where everyone involved feels respected and valued.
Absolutely.
And the documents highlight some fantastic examples of
Right.
how this can be done successfully. Like the Wirlaman Noongar people in case study 2-4, they're actively working to revitalize their language and culture through workshops and camps.
Yeah.
And even the repatriation of archival song recordings.
That's amazing.
It's like they're piecing together their heritage one song, one story at a time. What's fascinating about their work is that vital link between language revitalization and caring for country.
Absolutely.
They're not separate endeavors. They're two sides of the same coin. The documents highlight this repeatedly.
Yes.
Language is the key to understanding and transmitting indigenous knowledge.
It is.
It's like losing a language is like losing a whole way of seeing and understanding the world.
Yeah.
It makes sense that revitalizing language is so central to our knowledge, our way.
Absolutely.
And it's encouraging to see how communities are adapting to the times, even incorporating technology into their efforts.
Yes.
They're not shying away from using digital tools to manage and monitor their country.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Okay.
You mentioned drones and apps earlier. What are some specific examples of how technology is being used in conjunction with traditional knowledge?
Well, some groups are using drones to map country,
Oh, wow.
to track the movements of threatened species,
Okay.
or even monitor the health of vegetation.
Okay.
Others are using apps to record traditional ecological knowledge, creating digital databases
Okay.
that can be accessed by future generations.
So it's not about choosing between tradition and technology.
Right.
It's about finding ways to use them together.
Exactly.
Speaking of combining different ways of knowing,
Yeah.
the concept of two-way science comes up a lot
Yes.
in the documents.
It does.
What exactly does that mean?
Two-way science is about creating a space for genuine knowledge exchange
Okay.
between indigenous knowledge systems and Western scientific methods.
Okay.
It's not about one being superior to the other.
Okay.
It's about recognizing the strengths of both and finding ways to integrate them.
So it's about collaboration
Yeah.
and mutual respect. Can you give us an example of two-way science in action?
Well, case study 2-9 focuses on Walloona Remote Community School.
Okay.
They partnered with the Science Pathways program to develop an integrated two-way science learning program.
Wow.
And Martu Rangers and elders and community members lead learning activities,
Okay.
both on country and in the classroom.
So it's like breaking down the barriers
Exactly.
between traditional and Western learning.
Yeah,
It's about bringing those different perspectives together
it is.
and creating a more holistic understanding of the world And it seems like this idea of collaboration is central to our knowledge, our way.
Absolutely. Collaboration isn't just about sharing information. It's about building relationships.
Okay.
Respecting different ways of knowing.
Right.
And working together towards a common goal.
And the documents highlight that these partnerships are happening
in
all sorts of contexts, right?
That's exactly.
From research projects, focusing on things like medicinal plants, to joint management of protected areas, to even the development of indigenous-led businesses. Yeah.
The possibilities for collaboration are vast.
They are.
This is where it gets really exciting.
Yes.
Let's dive into some of those specific examples.
Okay.
In part 2 of our deep dive.
Great. Welcome back.
Hey.
You know, we've been talking about the power of collaboration in our knowledge, our way.
Yeah.
And it's truly inspiring to see how these partnerships are extending beyond Australia's borders.
You're right. It seems like Indigenous knowledge is making a real impact on the global stage.
Yes. So
what sparked this international interest?
Well, there's a growing recognition that Indigenous knowledge systems hold valuable insights for addressing global challenges like climate change, biodiversity loss, and sustainable development.
So it's not just about preserving cultural heritage.
Right.
It's about applying that knowledge to solve real-world problems.
Exactly. And the documents highlight the World Indigenous Network, or WIN, as a prime example of this global exchange.
Founded in 2012, it brings together Indigenous peoples from all over the world to share knowledge, learn from each other, and advocate for their rights in environmental management.
That sounds incredible.
It is.
It's like a global network of knowledge holders coming together to share their wisdom and experiences. Was Australia involved in the formation of WIN?
Absolutely. The first WIN conference was actually held in Darwin.
Oh, wow.
Back in 2013.
Okay.
With an announcement from then Prime Minister Julia Gillard.
Wow.
And there's a powerful quote from Jagari George, who is a Wulgarukaba traditional owner and co-chair of the WIN National Advisory Group. About the event.
What did he say?
He said, "This was a proud moment. As I stood and listened to the Prime Minister's words, I felt the enormity and the possibilities of WIN across the world.
Wow.
And I knew I had to be a part of it."
You can really feel his passion and commitment to this global movement. It's not just about sharing knowledge. It's about amplifying Indigenous voices on a global scale.
Precisely. And it's not just talk. There are real-world examples of knowledge transfer happening through WIN. Case Study 4.1 highlights how Aboriginal fire management knowledge from Australia is being shared internationally.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I know Australia has a long history of Indigenous fire management. What can other countries learn from these practices?
Well, the Wunga Rangers, who are known for their expertise in controlled burning, have been traveling to other countries to share their techniques and knowledge. It's not just about the technical aspects of burning. It's about a whole philosophy of land management that's rooted in deep understanding, respect, and responsibility.
It's like Indigenous Australians are becoming global ambassadors for sustainable living, sharing their ancient wisdom to help address modern-day environmental challenges.
And their expertise is being recognized at the highest levels. The documents mention Indigenous Australians participating in international conventions. And organizations like the Convention on Biological Diversity, or CBD, and the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. Or IPBES, for those unfamiliar. These are major players in the global environmental arena.
That's amazing. What kind of contributions are Indigenous Australians making within these organizations?
They're bringing their perspectives, their experiences, and their knowledge to shape international policies and assessments. For example, the 2018 IPBES Global Biodiversity Assessment prominently featured the role of Indigenous peoples in caring for the natural world. It was a significant acknowledgement of the value and relevance of Indigenous knowledge on a global scale.
That's a huge step forward.
It is.
It sounds like the world is finally starting to listen to Indigenous voices and recognize the importance of their knowledge. In addressing global environmental issues, what are some examples of this knowledge being put into practice on an international level?
Well, the documents mention a dialogue hosted by the Karen community of Hin Lad Nai in Thailand. Experts from Indigenous local and scientific knowledge systems came together
Wow.
to reflect on the IPBES assessment on pollinators, pollination, and food production.
So it's not just a one-way flow of information from indigenous knowledge holders to Western scientists.
Yeah.
It's about genuine cross-cultural exchange and collaboration.
Exactly. And this dialogue in Thailand led to some insightful observations about the Karen community's rotational farming systems, which promote biodiversity and protect pollinators.
Wow.
They even produced a set of mobile posters that translated key scientific messages from the assessment into a format that was easy to understand and discuss within the local context.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's a great example of how to bridge the gap between scientific research and practical application.
Yeah.
Particularly within indigenous communities, are there other examples of these types of global knowledge-sharing networks?
Definitely. The documents also mention the Community-Based Monitoring and Information Systems Network, or CBMIS, which is a global alliance of indigenous peoples and local communities who are monitoring the health of their lands and seas.
So think of it like a global citizen science network.
Yes.
Where indigenous communities use their knowledge and observations to track environmental change and contribute to scientific understanding.
It's amazing.
That's a powerful example of how indigenous knowledge can contribute to global scientific efforts.
Yeah.
It seems like this momentum is building and indigenous knowledge is becoming increasingly sought out.
Absolutely.
And incorporated into international efforts to address environmental challenges.
And there are other organizations like the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IIFBES, and the Indigenous Earth Wisdom Working Group within the IUCN. Both of which advocate for the recognition and integration of indigenous knowledge in environmental policy and management.
It's inspiring to see this shift towards more holistic and inclusive approaches to conservation and sustainability. It feels like there's a real recognition of the vital role of indigenous knowledge and leadership in shaping a better future for the planet.
I agree. But before we get too caught up in the global picture, it's important to remember that our knowledge, our way, starts right here at home.
You're right. Let's shift our focus back to Australia. And explore what actions we can take to support our knowledge, our way within our own communities in part 3. So we've seen how Indigenous Australians are leading the way, both locally and globally, in caring for country. But you know what I keep thinking about?
What's that?
What can we, as everyday Australians, actually do to support our knowledge, our way? Where do we even begin?
That's a great question. And one that the documents address head on. They outline some practical actions towards best practice. Steps that individuals and communities can take to make a real difference.
So where do we start?
Well, the foundation is recognizing that our knowledge, our way, is built on indigenous-led governance. This means respecting customary laws and ensuring that indigenous communities have control over decisions about their knowledge.
So it's not about imposing external rules or structures, but rather empowering communities to manage their knowledge according to their own traditions and protocols.
And that often requires resources. The documents emphasize the importance of providing adequate funding to support indigenous-led initiatives. Things like language programs, cultural centers, and research projects driven by indigenous communities themselves.
It's about putting our money where our mouth is, investing in the future of these knowledge systems. But funding is only part of the equation. The documents also talk about the importance of relationships.
That's a crucial point. Strong, respectful relationships are the heart of successful partnerships. And that starts with listening. Truly listening to indigenous voices. Understanding their perspectives and acknowledging their expertise.
It's about approaching these relationships with humility. Recognizing that we have much to learn. You mentioned partnerships. What are some specific ways we can collaborate with indigenous communities?
The possibilities are vast. You know, supporting indigenous ranger programs, engaging in two-way science initiatives, collaborating on land management projects. All of these offer opportunities to work together towards shared goals. And the documents provide a helpful framework for navigating these collaborations, outlining clear steps for sharing and weaving knowledge.
I remember seeing a visual representation of that process in the document.
Figure 5.4 beautifully lays out the steps. emphasizing the importance of clear communication, respectful engagement, and a shared commitment to applying the knowledge gained for the benefit of all.
So it's not just about extracting information.
Right.
It's about a true exchange.
Exactly.
Working together to create something new and beneficial.
Yeah.
What about education?
Yeah.
What role does education play in supporting our knowledge our way?
Education is key.
Yeah.
We've already seen fantastic examples like the Yili Aboriginal Community School and the Walloona Remote Community School.
Right.
Both of which prioritize Indigenous language, culture, and knowledge.
Yeah.
But it's not just about specialized schools.
Right.
Integrating Indigenous perspectives into mainstream curriculum is crucial.
Okay.
So all students can learn from these valuable knowledge systems.
It's about broadening our understanding of what knowledge is and where it comes from. Are there resources available to help educators incorporate Indigenous knowledge into their classrooms?
There are some great initiatives out there.
Okay.
Like the Living Knowledge Project.
Okay.
Which provides materials for teaching Indigenous knowledge in science education.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's important to remember that this isn't just about teaching facts.
Right.
It's about fostering a deeper understanding of Indigenous worldviews, values, and ways of being.
It's about shifting from a Eurocentric perspective to a more inclusive, holistic understanding of knowledge and learning.
Absolutely.
So for you, the listener tuning in to this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's one thing you can do today to support our knowledge our way in your own community?
Start by learning about the Indigenous history and cultures of the land you live on.
Okay.
Seek out opportunities to learn from Indigenous elders and knowledge holders. Support Indigenous-led organizations and businesses.
Okay.
And speak up.
Right.
Challenge racism and discrimination wherever you see it. And advocate for policies that recognize and protect Indigenous rights.
It's about taking action, not just absorbing information.
It is.
This deep dive has been an incredible learning experience for me. And I hope it sparked some ideas for you, too.
Me too.
It's been a privilege sharing these insights with you.
Likewise.
Remember, Indigenous knowledge is a gift.
Yes.
A treasure that holds profound wisdom for all of us.
It does.
By embracing our knowledge our way, we not only honor the past, but we also create a path towards a more just equitable and sustainable future for all Australians.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.